Okay, Commissioners, the next item is item number 10, application for an advisory report in Central Park at the East 64th Street entrance. Central Park is a scenic landmark. Docket number 16-2793, block 1111, lot 1. An English romantic style public park designed in 1856 by Olmsted and Vox. And this is an application to construct a barrier-free access ramp, modify the wall, install railings, and replace paving.
All right, just before we start, I just want to introduce Ann Jennings. This will be her first presentation in front of the Commission. She's been working here for a couple of months. So welcome.
Thank you. All right, good afternoon, Commissioners. Ann Jennings, Preservation Staff. This application is at the East 64th Street entrance to Central Park on Fifth Avenue within the Central Park Scenic Landmark. The proposal is to create an opening in the perimeter wall just south of the East 64th Street entrance, construct a barrier-free access ramp, install handrails at this stairway, and replace the paving of the sidewalk along Fifth Avenue. Chris Nolan of the Central Parks Conservancy is here to present the application.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Christopher Nolan with the Central Park Conservancy. We're here to present a project to create an accessible access to the Arsenal and Zoo area from Central Park, Fifth Avenue and 64th Street. The next slide. Site area is down in the southeast corner of the park. The entrance is to 64th Street. Our project actually includes, next slide, an in-kind restoration of the perimeter from 65th Street all the way down to 60th Street, and the project site within the park, within the perimeter wall, it's about 1/4 of an acre, just under 1/4 of an acre, right inside between the arsenal and the perimeter wall. Currently, there is no accessible access at the main entrance of the building. You have to walk down from 64th Street down to 61st Street. It's about 1/3 of a mile, actually. 3 blocks down, 3 blocks back towards the building. As you can see, the condition of the perimeter, it's been decades since the perimeter has been reconstructed. The hex paver will be replaced. The granite block borders on either side will be replaced. Next slide. Going through the existing conditions, there's spots where there's heaving and bird baths and puddling. It's actually not an accessible service in itself. Next slide. Work will be done in kind, with particular care given to preserving the existing stand of American elms. Next slide. The site, there's a formal staircase that comes down at the 64th entry, which is on access to the entrance to the building itself. There's steps down from Fifth Avenue and then back up into the building. The accessible entrance is on the south side of the building. Our access is created on the south side in this section of landscape. There's a strong geometry created by the facade of the building and the facade of the perimeter wall. There's a kind of parallel paths between the building, this path here, and the wall itself. Next slide. You can go to the next slide. Our project will also address landscape improvements on the north and south side of the steps. There's about 1/4 acre of landscape improvements, which will essentially maintain the symmetry in the planting palette and then some irrigation infrastructure upgrades. There is some modest plant removal. There's a couple of very small understory trees that will need to be removed that are kind of old and not in particularly good condition to accommodate the ramp. The work will also include the in-kind reconstruction of this set of granite steps coming in and the addition of modern handrails to the staircase. Next slide. Our project includes about 10 feet off the pier. We create an accessible ramp. It's about 1,600 square feet, the whole area the ramp sits in. They're parallel to the path and parallel to the wall itself. By grading it and actually sloping parallel to the wall, it parallels the contours, which allow us to drop at a rate that's slightly less than 5%, which obviates the need for handrails, and then turning 90 degrees and coming down perpendicular to the slope. This is the only section which is by definition a ramp. This is the only section here, it's about 30 feet that requires handrails, and then we go back. We particularly graded it that way to prevent seeing the stripes of the handrails through the landscape. It kind of lays in quite nicely in the landscape. Next slide. The entrance, this is the existing condition. There's 2 piers. These are kind of atypical pedestrian entrances. These handrails were kind of modern. We added them just about 2000. They're attached to the historic posts. There's a bronze plaque here, which we had an application for a number of years ago, which directs people down to the 61st Street entrance, and this is where our entrance goes. Next slide. So our entrance, we're proposing to cut open the perimeter wall 10 feet off the pier with a 60-inch opening. We will finish the perimeter wall consistent with all the other pedestrian entrances. Our proposal is to remove the handrails which were added to these posts in about 2000. This doesn't function, the posts don't function as a handrail because of the finials and inboard. It's a pretty wide set of steps. It's intensely used. We thought it was appropriate to have 2 handrails. There's a reference to about 80 inches being the maximum width between a set of handrails. The condition of the wall, there's an atypical pier at the entrance, given the prominence of the location. That's historic. The typical historic entrance has bluestone piers, and then all entrances that were added kind of late 19th century, early 20th century. The wall did not have the piers put in, but the wall was kind of, the plinth was finished with the bevel edge, and the top coping was beveled, which is what we're proposing to do. So a cross-section, the existing condition, the only spot on the perimeter where we're making a modification to its existing condition that's not directly in kind is on the section where there's a bus stop. Currently, there's hex pavers here that were replaced in the late 1990s to create an accessible access, which kind of removes the rhythm of the granite block borders. Everything else going through, you can see we open up the perimeter wall, the ramp is right adjacent to the wall, sloping parallel to it, and in the distance you can see the handrail. We're providing lighting. It's about a 30-inch high bollard at a 50-inch spacing and kind of lays low in the landscape. And the idea is to create a planting. It's kind of a light touch on the landscape. Next slide. Larger cross-section, again, you can see where we come through. There's a threshold stone at the entrance, which is typical to the pedestrian entrances. The hex paver ramp that slopes down. You can see the handrail in a larger section and bollards. It's a SketchUp model. You can see we were able to grade this to not require grade this, so this curb stone just slightly sticks out of the grade just to create the kind of edge condition. Next slide. And with plantings, the fact that they run parallel to the contour, it lays quite lightly in the landscape. The only section that really peaks above the plantings are those handrails off in the ramp section. Next slide. From a material perspective, standard hex pavers, which matches the perimeter, will be the paving on the ramp itself. The coping, I should say the curbstones, will match, our intent is to match the granite of the cheek walls of the granite steps that is existing. There's a dark gray granite threshold stone, and you can see how we'll finish the perimeter wall. There is a section of hex block which actually goes out to the curb line, which is atypical, which was installed to create an accessible travelway for the bus stop. We're actually able to take that up today and use sawn granite block to kind of restore the rhythm of the granite block edging, which is on either side of the travelway. Next slide. This is a section of where it was done up on 110th Street. This is an accessible granite block entrance, which will be restored with a pattern. There's a rhythm of diamonds, squares, and basket weave as we go up, which will be maintained. And again, the larger cross section, you can see our bollards, just enough lighting to provide enough safe travelway down. Next slide. 60-inch travelway hex pavers with the lights and the bollards at 15 feet on center. And then the cross section of the handrails. These posts in the upper section are historic. We currently have an 1.5-inch handrail that kind of hangs off them, which we believe is kind of an uncomfortable kind of modern addition to it. Our intent is to restore the original lamber of those pipes, which is the original element on the outside, and then inboard of them, put the new simple handrails. This is just a kind of light touch on the metal, 1.5-inch diameter, with simple steel posts that go into the ground. Next slide. And again, it's a 1-inch pipe, nominal dimension, which just give you 1 3/8 inches, and a piece of bar stock at the post to kind of have just enough structure to provide the requirements and kind of a light touch. It's transparent. And that is the project.
A couple of questions.
Yes.
Just point of interest for me. Are there other entrances to Central Park that have such a significant ADA challenged entrance that you guys are going to be working on?
Not with proximity to a building. Really, as the main entrance to this is, you have the zoo and you have the Parks Department headquarters.
Right.
There are others we've actually presented. We've created ADA access, say at West 67th Street. There's 2 playgrounds, which are kind of facilities that require access. There, we're able to regrade existing path systems in a way that creates the access. This is really
quite
unique.
a drop, right?
This
Yeah.
is really unique in the fact that there's no existing path system. It's only about 60 feet of landscape
Right.
there.
And because it's going into a significant building.
Right.
My other question is, who prepares your graphics and your design? They're beautiful.
We do all those in-house.
In-house?
Yes.
Congratulations.
Really gorgeous. Right, yes, Michael?
The new path is going along the back of the existing wall.
Yes.
Is it following the terrain there, or are you going to be exposing the lower portions of that wall that were previously covered with dirt?
We will not be doing that. It does parallel the wall, it's actually just in border of the wall. The stone will stick up right up against it, there's bluestone plinth on the wall, below that is some schist coursing.
So the wall
This will
itself
have-
goes downhill, is what you're saying, at 5%?
No, the wall, there'll be a wedge of exposed stone as our ramp goes down, but the current contour essentially does that now.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
So you're not
Yeah.
undermining that wall in any way or going to
No,
be hurting that?
no. The perimeter wall actually currently retains the grade of the perimeter. The perimeter is a higher elevation than the landscape inside, so we're able to kind of.
Oh, all right.
All right, other questions? Yes, Michael?
I'm just curious why you didn't actually make the opening on the other side of the post. I don't believe the stone's keyed in there, is it, right?
I'm not sure I understand. On this side here?
No.
The other side,
Right.
right
On that
there.
side. Start your
Yeah.
5 feet at the post and go downtown from there.
We just wanted to give, enough distance off the post to kind of have that post read from the symmetry on both sides as you go in. You mean move this entrance closer, this 10 feet, maybe
Yeah,
5
so
feet?
it takes off from the post and it doesn't become,
Yeah.
to me, it doesn't become so much a handicapped access ramp. The whole
Right.
family is standing up there and then
Right.
the person in the wheelchair can.
We evaluated that. We didn't want the post actually being attached to the wall, the column, the pier really being attached to the wall. We wanted to have a section of wall, so
Okay.
you stood next to it.
Okay.
I mean, I guess
To follow that, should there be, if what you're saying, Michael, might mean that there would be an additional post, almost like a third post, so that you have the stair opening, then you have the ramp opening, maybe at the same dimension, and so it's just a bigger way into the whole system, so that the handicap access is not relegated to kind of a small secondary, and all of it is a kind of a new entry.
Right. We proposed the opening basically consistent with all the modern openings to the park. It's kind of consistent vocabulary for all those openings. The width, this width of the granite block is kind of the foyer to the steps. So we see those kind of both within that foyer. That's actually existing dimension that kind of fit in there.
I don't see any issue with this. It seems that it's very modest and simple, and this is the kind of openings that you've done elsewhere, is that correct? Okay.
But you mean there are other handicap openings that are like this?
No,
Other
it's consistent with other modern openings to the park. The original park only had about 16 entrances, I believe, and now there's over 70. So most of them were put in the early part of the 20th century.
Right, so you showed us a photograph of one where sometimes you have the column or the pier, and in other cases, you just have like the end situation that you have over here.
Yes.
Okay.
That is a 20th century condition.
All right, any other questions? Okay, we'll take testimony. Kelly Carroll?
Kelly Carroll, Historic Districts Council. HDC thanks the Central Park Conservancy for presenting to our committee and appreciates the time and resources that go into such meetings. That said, HDC does not support this application as adequate and nearby access to the Arsenal Zoo currently exists. A compelling argument for the need of this ramp remains unidentified. This prophylactic intervention is synonymous with unnecessary and at the expense of some historic fabric. Thank you.
Thank you. Max Yeston?
Max Yaston, Landmark West. The committee finds it regrettable to make an additional cut into Central Park's historic perimeter walls and disturb a perfectly planted hillside, while 2 pedestrian ADA accessible paths currently exist 3 blocks to the south and 2.7 blocks to the north. Other than this, the committee finds the design of the ramp itself acceptable. If the commission decides that a ramp is necessary, we believe it could be improved in the following ways. The existing plantings and ericaceous shrubs would help conceal the ramp perfectly well. They were originally designed in concert with Parks Department architect Aymar Embry's elegant and formal entrance to the Arsenal as the redesigned headquarters for Robert Moses' park administration. Removing this unique and gracious symmetrical landscape, which differs significantly from the larger, picturesque, asymmetrical landscape of Central Park, would be ignoring a layer of the park's history. The original wrought iron wicket fence that marked the edge of the plantings should be returned to be consistent with this Moses-era design as well. However, our committee strongly objects to the proposed alterations to the staircase, especially the handrails. We contend that the existing rails be left alone, as they are unique solutions that meet a standard preservation methodology, i.e., retaining the historic fabric while making necessary adjustments to meet current challenges. In this case, the design keeps the historic posts while adjusting the height of the rail to meet ADA requirements. Let us not scrap this technically and visually innovative solution, not an uncomfortable modern addition as they have been described today by the CPC, as it works perfectly well. Additionally, adding multiple rails in the center would add unnecessary clutter to the otherwise open expanse of the stairway. It is one thing to provide required ADA accessibility, but it is quite another to create pedestrian lanes so narrow as to simulate a line at the supermarket. As a compromise, only one rail could be placed down the center, as this would avail individuals the choice of using their right or left hand on a rail and would maintain a decent amount of room to circulate up and down the stairway. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any more speakers? Right, we received a Community Board 7's recommendation. They approved the proposed design of the improvements, including the proposed ramp, and applauds the Central Park Conservancy for adding an accessible entrance at this very important location at Central Park, as well as for its thoughtful and historically sensitive design. All right. Would you like to respond to some of the comments that were made right now?
Just that, our position is that walking a third of a mile back is not an adequate accessible entrance to the main headquarters of the Parks and Park.
All right, you said one other thing about the in-between handrails.
Yes.
Is that by standard a certain amount? Because you said something like 80 inches or something.
There's a reference in the building code,
Yeah.
80 inches wide would require double sets of handrails.
Okay.
And because this is associated with the entrance of the building, this is a very, very heavily used entrance to the park.
Right.
And our intent was to provide two means of travel. Somebody can come up and go down at the same time without competing for the same handrail in the center.
Okay. All I know is that when you have very wide steps, sometimes you really do need these intermediary visits, especially if there are a lot of people moving. It's just safer. People need to hold on to something. Yes, Diana, and then Roberta.
I wanted to ask the other question, which is about the railing itself, which is the current railing it does have a certain character to it. You made a decision to move it. It looks like a lighter. You think it's more transparent and therefore better rather than using the historic?
Well, our intent is actually restore the edge condition, the edge rail, to its historic condition. It had a large diameter pipe, which was removed in the early 2000s to add the handrail dimension. And the intent is to restore that large diameter pipe and bring the weight back. The post exists, the rails do not. Our intent is to restore the rails as they were historically. But that does not function as the contemporary handrail because of the width and the finials.
Roberta, you have a question?
I had a railing question.
Okay.
I'm just trying to, that is what he's saying. So you're saying that you're not really, you're not changing the rails in, the existing rails aren't being changed, but where there's rails and you're adding rails, you're adding a different.
You know how to go back to that. Let me go to the graphic and it'll be best to, the handrails cross sections. This one here. Yeah, on the upper section, there's a large diameter pipe which currently is missing. Cantilevered off of that is the modern handrail. So the posts, those posts don't have a rail that connects them. It's a cantilevered handrail that you would see attached to a wall. Our intent is to remove that, restore the handrail, or restore the edge rail, I should say, to what it was historically with the large diameter post, and put the handrails inboard to provide double access. Somebody can go down the stairs and up the stairs and not compete for the same handrail.
Can I ask one more question?
So there won't be a rail in the center.
There are two rails
Two.
through the center.
There are
of the
two rails
steps.
in the center, but they're not at the landing.
No, I mean, in the new, so the new is the bottom and the top is the existing, or is that?
No, those are two different
These
sections.
are there are two different sections through the same set of steps, yes. They're both proposed conditions.
So the one on top is the end condition, and the one in the
Yes.
middle is the
Right.
middle, and
The section
bottom
on
is the
top
middle
restores
condition.
restores the in rail to its historic condition. These are proposed modern handrails in the center.
I'm just wondering if you've looked at the possibility of having the ramp return rounded rather than square.
We did evaluate that. I mean, certainly, as was in Landmarks West testimony, this is not a typical homesteading landscape. There's only 60 feet. Actually, it's not actually technically possible. It would require a much larger retaining wall, and you would see the face of that retaining wall considerably. It's kind of difficult. It's actually quite difficult to make a sloping thing on a curve. It's not impossible to do. It would have a much greater impact on the overall landscape and break up that kind of symmetrical. It's a very kind of linear landscape parallel to the building facade all the way up, and works with the topography quite well.
The down ramp would be much more visible.
Absolutely.
In that scenario, so
Yeah.
it's kind of in one moves the other.
I think it's a very sensitive design and incorporated with the landscaping. I think that they've made a compelling case why it's needed at this location. I'm not persuaded that because there's an entrance on 61st Street, which is handicap accessible, you shouldn't have it here. You have building right here, which gets a lot of, I think, people come to it. And so it's appropriate to have handicap access at this location. Are there any concerns, John?
No, I agree with you, and in particular, because that entrance is used by school groups. Buses often drop kids off for the zoo right behind, and you have them stopping in two different locations in order to separating one group of kids from another. Obviously not a Landmarks concern, but it is true. That's what's happening now.
But it's a parks concern, and for them, I think they recognize that and have incorporated it. Okay, if there are no other issues, we can close the hearing. Okay, Fred, you want to read that?
Sure. In the matter of Central Park, East 64th Street entrance to Central Park, a scenic landmark. The application is to construct a barrier-free access ramp, modify the wall, install railings, and replace paving. I recommend approval, noting that the proposed alterations of the wall and landscaping will help provide a barrier-free entrance to the park without significantly increasing the amount of paving, eliminating any significant landscape features, or disrupting a prominent vista. That the new opening at the perimeter wall will be consistent in basic size, proportions, and design with other secondary entrances which have been gradually added to the overall perimeter walls over time. That the historic masonry will be salvaged so that it may be used for future repairs to the wall. That the rectilinear form of the ramp will be compatible with the formal composition and limited size of this section of the park, which serves as the setting of the front of the arsenal. That the asphalt hex block paving and granite curbing will match the existing the materials and design of the paving and curbing which adjoins the base of the ramp and will be compatible with the character of this portion of the park. That the simple design, limited size, dark finishes, and discrete placement of the handrail and lighting will help them remain subordinate secondary elements within the landscaping. That the installation of the proposed stair railings in conjunction with the restoration of the historic fencing at the sides of the steps, which will include the removal of modern railings, will help maintain necessary safety standards. That the proposed stair railings will be simply designed and typical in terms of material, finish, size, and placement. That the replacement of the asphalt hex block pavers at the border of the sidewalk with accessible granite block pavers will help these portions of the sidewalk to better relate to the existing Belgian block pavers at the majority of the border, while also maintaining barrier-free access to bus stops and other pedestrian crossing areas. And that the replacement of the pavers will help restore the sidewalk closer to its historic appearance, which featured a center walkway between wide perimeter borders with cobblestone pavers and trees.
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed? The application